Yeah, because you never know, do you? Good morning, everybody. Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
Let us pray. Lord God, Heavenly Father, thank you for this day that you have made, that we can rejoice and be glad in it. Thank you for the beautiful weather, seasonable weather. We ask that you bless the farmers that are going out and getting everything planted, and whether in the large fields or in our gardens and things. Thank you for the joy that brings us. We pray that you watch over all those who labor today, and give us the blessing of your Holy Spirit to lead us into all truth as we study your word today. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So we are picking up with the Levite man and the little cult of in the hill country of Ephraim there, and then this group of rough men come in, and they come to Micah's house, and they take the carved image and the ephod and the household gods and the metal image and everything, and the priest comes up and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they said, just put your hand over your mouth. Keep quiet. And hey, why don't you come and be our priest? And why would you just want to be a priest to one man when you could be a priest to our whole crew here? And he thinks that's a great idea. And so in verse 21, so they turned and departed, and putting the little ones and the livestock and the goods in front of them. So this isn't just a band of robbers. This is like a nomadic tribe of people from Dan there, moving to find a place. So they got kids and livestock and all their stuff. And they go a distance from the house of Micah, and the men who were in the houses near Micah's house called out, and they caught up to him, and they shouted to him and turned and said, what are you doing? What's with the big company, and where are you coming from, and what's going on? He said, you take my gods that I made, and you take my priest, and you go away, and what have you left me with? What are you going to leave me with? And the Danites said to him, don't let your voice be heard among us. Silence. And I like what he said, don't let your voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household. It's a very third-person sort of mob threat there. It's like he's like, all you've left me with is my life. What are you going to leave me with? And they said, hey, you better shut up, or some rough men might come and make a mess of you here. It'd be a real shame if all you had left was your life, and maybe you had a little accident with that, huh? So the people of Dan went on their way. And when Micah saw they were too strong, he went back to his home too. So it was like, he's like, I can't beat them, so I just give up. Verse 27, the people of Dan took what Micah had made, those household gods. Remember, he had made with the silver that he had stolen from his mom and stuff, and they took the priest, and they came to Laish, and to a people quiet and unsuspecting, and they struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire. So these Danites were looking for a dwelling place, and they come upon this place that those spies had kind of sought out, and they saw that, okay, yeah, hey, they're in the middle of nowhere, and nobody's going to miss them. So they come and they take over the city there, and whether it's the city gate, whatever that is that they burned, they were inhabiting it, so they didn't want to burn the whole place to the ground, but whatever it meant they burned to conquer it, that they did. And there was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon, and there were no dwellings anywhere, meaning there's nobody's going to come to their rescue. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob, and they rebuilt the city and lived in it. And they named the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their ancestor, who was born to Israel. But the name of the city was Laish at the first. So when we hear the city of Dan through the rest of the Old Testament, this is the origin story of that place.
They're from the original tribe of Dan?
They're descendants of the tribe of Dan, yeah. Yep.
Still called Dan?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Well, not today.
Oh.
It's one of those lost antiquity kind of things. But so the people of Dan set up carved images for themselves. So, they steal the gods and they set up their own gods. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up Micah's carved image that he had made as long as the house of God was at Shiloh. So a couple things right there. Does everybody's edition say son of Moses there? Any footnotes or anything?
Yes.
What's the footnote say? Or Manasseh. So Gershom was the son of Moses, and so there's this little bit of a variance there in some of the Hebrew texts where like an extra letter is floated there above the name Moses to make it possibly mean Manasseh. Meaning, it's such a shameful thing that this descendant of Levite was, this descendant of Moses was causing all this trouble and, being this false priest and setting up these images and stuff. It almost seems like the rabbinic scribes of way back when tried to cover it up. But we have...
It bodes bad things, and
Right.
You're not worshiping God, obviously.
Exactly.
There's some reconciling to come down the road.
Exactly. And so for that to be attached to a descendant of Moses, it's like, nah, couldn't have been him. I mean, maybe we made a mistake. Let's just sort of hedge our bet. But Gershom was the son of Moses, and it makes sense that this is the case. So it's the grandson of Moses and his descendants. They were the priests to the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. That's probably in like 722 when the Assyrians come in and wreck the northern kingdom. So they have a long-standing issue there up in Dan, the Danites. So they have set up their false idols, and they're setting up all their stuff where they are, but actually the house of God was where? In Shiloh, because that's where the tabernacle was. So this is probably indicative of kind of what was happening all over that place, all over the area. This is one little incident, but just all the ungodliness that was happening throughout Israel. Mm-hmm.
And I am a little confused, because that's me, but, so basically the Danites had no place to go, whatever, so they're gonna make their own place, so they take over from, yeah.
Correct. So they had been given an inheritance of land back when Joshua was divvying everything up. But they were never able to subdue that land. They were never able to kick out the inhabitants and all those things. So they never were able to really settle there. And so they were looking for a place that they could settle and be of their own. And so then, they went and sort of marauded and conquered this town.
To God.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, they had wandered off into idolatry, just like, that was happening. That's the whole cycle of Judges, is to fall into idolatry and things. But this is a case where that really came home to roost for them. So, yep. All right, so chapter 19, sort of a new story, if you will, and begins with the preface of, in those days there was no king in Israel. We've heard that refrain a few times in the book of Judges as well, knowing that there would eventually be a king, and we're kind of drawing closer to that time when they're going to be asking for a king. And a certain Levite was sojourning in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, who took to himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. And his concubine was unfaithful to him. And she went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah and was there some 4 months. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back. Literally to sort of woo her back. He had with him his servant and a couple of donkeys, because in case he needed to make a trade. Yeah. I got a set of golf clubs for my wife. Oh, does she enjoy them? Oh, I figured it was a good trade.
Donkeys are probably easier to control.
I don't know. Might not be. And she brought him to her father's house. So they met up, and she's like, "Well, come to my dad's house. You got to deal with him." And when the girl's father saw him, he came with joy to meet him. Like, oh, my son-in-law, And so it's like this father-in-law turns out to be a pretty good guy. I mean, the girl was unfaithful to the Levite, but the father-in-law isn't mad at the Levite. I mean, he's all hospitable with him and things. So the girl's father made him stay, and he remained with him for 3 days. Hang out. You've come this far, stay with us for a while. Just think of in terms of just sort of hospitality and just I think longer-term trips and sort of things. You don't just show up and then leave the next day. So they ate and drank and spent the night there. And on the 4th day, they arose early in the morning, and he prepared to go. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, "Strengthen your heart with a morsel of bread, and after that you may go." He's like, "Oh, stay a while, have a little bite to eat." So the two of them sat and ate and drank together. And the girl's father said to the man, "Oh, please, be pleased to spend the night. Let your heart be merry. Just stay another day. Just stay another day. Just, we love having you here, and just, I mean, it's pretty genuine. I mean, we've read enough of the Old Testament now where we're waiting for a shoe to drop. Yeah, what's the motive here? What's happening next? But yeah.
I'm sorry.
No.
Was the word concubine meaning something different in those days than it does now?
Basically, it's a wife.
I don't believe it.
Yeah. But, verse 4 says his father-in-law, the girl's father, made him stay.
Right.
So it is a relationship of there's a legal binding marital type relationship between these two. They would have more than one concubine, and probably of the concubines, the one that was maybe favored the most or was first might be referred to as the wife, or the one from whom you got the queen, and then you got the queen consorts. Or that's not the right word, but the rest of the harem kind of idea and things. I mean, this is not indicated as being God pleasing in any way. As far as having multiple wives is not, never works out for anybody. But we also don't have them listed as having more than one wife either. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
One's enough.
So they're saying, okay, spend the night, let your heart be merry again. And the man rose up to go. His father-in-law pressed him till he spent the night there again. Verse 8, and on the 5th day, he arose early in the morning to depart. And the girl's father said, "Oh, strengthen your heart and wait till the day declines. Just wait till the afternoon." So they both ate. And when the man and his concubine and his servant rose up to depart, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said to him, "Behold, now the day is toward evening. Spend the night." Behold, the day draws to a close. Lodge here, let your hearts be merry, and then tomorrow morning, get up early, then you can go. Yeah. I think it's just this sort of dance of hospitality that just sort of says that as long as you keep getting invited, you haven't worn out your welcome. And if there would be a certain time, it would be like, all right, well, you said you were going to leave in the morning, so let me help you pack your bags. That's the indicator. Says, okay, it's actually time to go. But the man would not spend the night. So now instead of having left early in the morning, Now they're leaving late in the day. They can't travel quite as far. And that is going to be the problem. They don't get past these next cities that are going to cost them, that's going to be the trouble. If they left early, they would have gotten past them. They could have stayed somewhere else, and maybe these issues would not have, that we're about to read about, might not have happened. So he arose and departed and arrived opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem, because the Jebusites still had control of the city that would become Jerusalem. It had many names in the Old Testament. But right now the Jebusites are in control of it, and so it's called Jebus. And the author is just making sure you know that's going to be Jerusalem eventually, just so you know where everybody is. He had with him a couple of saddled donkeys and his concubine, and when they were near Jebus and the day was nearly over, the servant said to his master, "Come now, let's turn aside to the city of the Jebusites and let's spend the night here." But his master said to him, "We will not turn aside into a city of foreigners who do not belong to the people of Israel. We will pass on to Gibeah." Yeah, you think this is a good idea. It's like, oh, let's not stay with the foreigners. If we stay with Israelites, then everything will be fine. Everything will not be fine. They would have been better off in Jebus. But the Levite is like, no, we're not going to stay with foreigners. We're going to stay with Israelites. So let's draw near to one of those places and spend the night in Gibeah or at Ramah. And so they passed and went on their way, and they got near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. They turned aside there and spent the night in Gibeah. And he went in and sat down in the open square of the city, for no one took them into his house to spend the night. A certain Levite. That's all we got at the beginning of 19. Yeah, which, he's sort of nameless, but in a way that is sometimes used to say it could have been anybody, because this was so, the things that are going to happen here were so commonplace. It was happening in so many places. It could have been anybody. Or there's another possibility. There was a certain Levite, meaning the Levite. The Levite. The one, whatever that means. It's like like perhaps right now if you just said there was a certain Ukrainian president. There's just things that would have been so commonplace known you don't need to refer to them. Or there was a certain Nazarene from Bethlehem. Was born in Bethlehem. It's like, okay, there's a certain infamy that comes with it. So that's a possibility too, that all the readers would have sort of known who they meant. That kind of thing. I don't know. And yeah. So what would have been common is that you come to a city and the hospitality of the Near East and of that culture would have said, people make a space. Come stay with us. That would have been the case. But we get our first clue that something isn't right. That nobody is taking them into the house to spend the night. This is almost more what we hear, what we sort of expect with like Jesus, Mary, and Joseph come into Bethlehem, and there is no room for them in the inn. Like literally, they're going to be out in the open middle of the town square, versus maybe some other things that we've come to know about that. But nobody's taking them in the house, so they're just going to spend the night in the square. It's sort of the marketplace area and things like that. So it's like, all right, we'll just stay here. It's But verse 16 says, "Behold, an old man was coming from his work in the field that evening. The man was from the hill country of Ephraim." Oh, that's where the certain Levite was from. So they got some things in common. "And he was sojourning in Gibeah, and the men of the place were Benjaminites." So the town is Benjaminite. The old man coming in is from Ephraim, sojourning in Gibeah. And the Levite and his servant were also from the hill country of Ephraim and were also sojourning, just traveling through Gibeah. Verse 17, "The old man lifted up his eyes and saw the traveler in the open square of the city. The old man said, where are you going, and where do you come from?" "We're passing from the Benjamin, from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, from which I come. I went to Bethlehem, and I'm going to the house of the Lord, but no one has taken me into his house." I'm going to my house or the house of the Lord, like he's going back to where he had set up. It's a little ambiguous there, but no one's taken me in. "We have straw and feed for our donkeys, and bread and wine for me and your female servant and young man with your servants. There is no lack of anything." He's like, "Look, we're not even going to impose on anybody. We got everything we need. We just need a place to stay." The old man said, "Peace be with you. I will care for all your wants. Only don't spend the night in the square." He's like, "You don't want to spend the night in the square. I've been here long enough. This is the bad part of town. This is a bad town."
In the square.
So he brought him into his house and gave the donkeys feed, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. Yes.
But yet, it says that, the old man was sojourning, traveling. So, but he established a house.
So the sojourner in your midst is the idea of of someone, just an outsider in general, who has come to live with you for a time. So it doesn't just mean that you're passing through. It can be that somebody from the outside has come in to stay for a while. Yeah. So they washed their feet and ate and drank. So they made themselves comfortable. Very hospitable. This is a good thing. And they were making their hearts merry. "Behold, the men of the city, worthless fellows, surrounded the house, beating on the door." So this is the point where we got to put up the parental advisory. If you're watching at home with kids in the room, maybe this is sort of R-rated area here now. And as we're reading this, think of a parallel story when something similar has happened, where people from out of town come in to a foreigner's house in a place, and bad things start happening in the night. Sodom and Gomorrah. This is Judges chapter 19, and that is in Genesis chapter 19. So it definitely seems like these are intended to be parallel. They said to the old man, the master of the house, "Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him." And the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, "No, my brothers, do not act so wickedly, since this man has come into my house. Do not do this vile thing. Behold, here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. Let me bring them out now. Violate them and do it." So, yeah, it's like, okay, how is this any better? It's not any better.
That sounds very similar.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Violate them, do with them what seems good to you, but against this man, do not do this outrageous thing. This is going to be bad either way. But the men would not listen to him, so the man seized his concubine and made her go out to them. And they knew her and abused her all night until the morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. And as the morning appeared, the woman came and fell down at the door of the man's house where her master was until it was light. And her master rose up in the morning, and he opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way. And behold, there was his concubine laying at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. And he said, "Get up, let's be going." But there was no answer. And he put her on the donkey, and the man rose up and went away to his home. And when he entered his house, he took a knife, and taking hold of his concubine, he divided her limb by limb into 12 pieces, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And all who saw it said, "Such a thing has never happened or been seen from the day that the people of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak." So they killed her. She died because of what the men had done to her. Him dividing her up and sending her out throughout Israel was a way of condemning the...
Send her to the 12 tribes.
Yeah, there's that idea. It was the idea of sending it out to say, look what happened here. What madness have we descended in that this could happen among the people of Israel, that this woman died having been abused and these things. So him dividing her up wasn't so much that's not how she died. It wasn't him doing something abusive to her, but it was a way of condemning the nation by saying, look at this horrible thing that has happened, and to send sort of a message that says, what have we become? Yeah, so, nothing as horrible as this has ever happened since we left Egypt. Before Egypt, yeah, there was the whole Sodom and Gomorrah thing, but yeah. So this is a bad deal. So now that the Benjaminites have sort of fallen victim or have perpetrated this, the people of Israel are going to be having issue with the Benjaminites now because the message has gone out now. So all the people of Israel came out from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, which is the eastern side of the Jordan. So not just within Canaan, but also that half tribe of Manasseh, everybody on the other side of the Jordan, they're coming in as well. And the chiefs of all the people, all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 men on foot that drew the sword. They got an army of 400,000 men. The message got sent. So this is the idea of militia. These are normally just farmers and workers and everything like that, but when it's time to go to war, everybody takes up their sword, and they show up and they say, what do we got to do? Now the people of Benjamin heard that the people of Israel had gone up to Mizpah, and the people of Israel said, tell us, how did this evil happen? And the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, I came to Gibeah, that belongs to Benjamin, my concubine, spent the night. The leaders of Gibeah rose against me and surrounded the house against me that night. They meant to kill me, and they violated my concubine, and she is dead. So I took hold of her and cut her into pieces and sent her throughout the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed abomination and outrage in Israel. Behold, you people of Israel, all of you, give your advice and counsel here. So it's like, look, you've all descended into idolatry. This is the fruit of that idolatry and the problems. So now what are we going to do about it? The people arose as one man and said, none of us will go to his tent, and none of us will return to his house. But now this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot, and we'll take 10 men of 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 of 10,000, and bring provisions for the people. So basically they're saying, we're going to organize our army. We're going to set it up into, divisions and battalions and, these various things. We'll get the provisions that we need. And we are going to come and repay Gibeah of Benjamin for all the outrage they have committed in Israel. So all the men of Israel gathered against the city, united as one man. The tribes of Israel sent men throughout the tribe of Benjamin and said, what evil is this that has taken place among you? Now therefore give up the men, the worthless fellows in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and purge evil from Israel. So it's like, look, we don't have to wipe out all of Benjamin's, the whole tribe of Benjamin. Just give us the worthless, just let us conquer Gibeah. Let us take care of these guys. And we'll be on our way. But the Benjaminites would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the people of Israel. The people of Benjamin came together out of the cities to Gibeah to go out to battle against the people of Israel. And the people of Benjamin mustered out of their cities that day 26,000 men who drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah who mustered 700 chosen men. Among all of these were 700 chosen men who were left-handed.
That's important to know.
So it could mean something like they were good with both hands, with a sword, that kind of idea too. So, and every one of them could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. So they were, you think of what skills did they have for battle, and one is that they were swordsmen. Another is that they were tricky swordsmen because they could fight with the other hand. They were also good sling throwers and things, so they had some talent and stuff. But the men of Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 men. All of these were men of war. So it's like they got together 26,000 men plus 700, and of that, 700 were sort of good warriors, but the rest of Israel had 400,000 men, and they were warriors. I mean, they were ready to, they knew how to fight. So it's like, this is not looking good for Benjamin, the Benjaminites. So Israel arose and went up to Bethel and inquired of God. Well, this is good. This is good. Let's ask God first. Who shall go up for us to fight against the people of Benjamin? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up first. So they arose in the morning and camped against Gibeah. So the siege is on. And they went to fight against Benjamin. And the men of Israel drew up the battle line against them at Gibeah. And the people of Benjamin came out of Gibeah and destroyed on that day 22,000 men of the Israelites. But the people, the men of Israel, took courage and again formed the battle line in the same place where they had formed it on the first day. They went up and wept before the Lord until the evening. And they inquired of the Lord, shall we again draw near to fight against our brothers, the people of Benjamin? And the Lord said, go up against them. So the first day did not go well. Because, you know, you're still they're in the fortified city. You know, you're playing an away game. There's difficulty there, so it was not a good day. So they're like, should we keep doing this? Are you with us? We need to make sure we're doing the right thing. And the Lord said, don't go up against them. So they went up against the second day. And the second day they destroyed 18,000 men of Israel. Then all the people of Israel, the whole army, wept at Bethel, and they sat before the Lord and fasted that day until evening. And they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And the people of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, ministered before it in those days, saying, shall we go out once more, or shall we cease? And he said, go up, for tomorrow I will give them into your hand. So you see in this, the 2 days of defeat as a disciplining or testing of the rest of the Israelites who had also fallen into idolatry. And as they're facing this, instead of going to their foreign gods, instead of despairing over their own strength or things, they go back to the Lord and they inquire of him. They go to the Ark of the Covenant. And they go before the Lord himself and are reinforced in their reconnection to the Lord. And so that's the whole concept of the cycle of the judges, where they're getting overrun by somebody and then they are driven to repentance and then they are restored. It's sort of like a mini cycle of that here, is that, you know, the army is there and then they're going out to fight, but to purge their own idolatry, they have defeated these 2 days, but they're more strongly going back to the Lord each time with this defeat to say, Lord, what do you want us to do? We need to make sure we're doing your thing, and that's the reassurance that God is giving, or that strengthening, that restoration that he's giving them. And the Lord said, go up tomorrow, I will give them into your hand. Now we're ready to say, okay, third day, now they're yours, because you're like solid with me now, so now we're going to go. So Israel set up men in ambush around Gibeah, and the people of Israel went up against Benjamin on the third day and set themselves in array against Gibeah as at other times. So they're sort of surrounding it. And they went out against the city, and as at the other times they began to strike and kill some of the people in the highways, one of which goes up to Bethel and the other to Gibeah, and in the open country, about 30 men of Israel. So they're just getting started. And the people of Benjamin said, they're routed before us, as at the first. But the people of Israel said, let us flee and draw them away from the city to the highways. It's like, it's a trap. It's like, oh, look, you've got us now. We should run away. So they rose up out of their place and set themselves at Baal Tamar, and the men of Israel who were in ambush rushed out of the place at Merah-Gibah, and there came against Gibeah 10,000 chosen men out of all Israel, and the battle was hard. But the Benjaminites did not know that disaster was close upon them. And the Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel. And the people of Israel destroyed 25,100 men of Benjamin that day. All these were men who drew the sword. So the people of Benjamin saw that they were defeated.
Lord defeated.
You caught that, James. Very good. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so who granted the victory, or whose victory was it? The Lord defeated Benjamin. Yeah. So the men of Israel gave ground to Benjamin because they trusted the men in ambush whom they had set against Gibeah. So they let them get away a little bit, but then the men in the ambush hurried and rushed against it and moved out and struck all the city with the edge of the sword. Now the appointed signal between the men of Israel and the men of the main ambush was that when they made a great cloud of smoke rise up out of the city, the men of Israel should turn in battle. Benjamin had begun to strike and kill about 30 men of Israel, and they said, surely they are defeated before us as before the battle. So there's a little more detail of that, of the ambush and things. But when the smoke signal began to rise out of the city, the Benjaminites looked behind, and they saw that the city went up in smoke to heaven. And then the men of Israel turned, and the men of Benjamin were dismayed, for they saw a disaster was close upon them. So they had rushed out. The other army had snuck in behind them, taken the city, light the smoke. The men who were running away fake, turn around, and now they say, now they're coming back at them, so now they've got them trapped. So they turned their backs before the men of Israel, and the battle overtook them. Surrounding the Benjaminites, they pursued them and trod them down from Nohah as far as opposite Gibeah in the east. 18,000 men of Benjamin fell, all of them men of valor, and they returned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. 5,000 of them were cut down in the highways, and they pursued hard to Gidom, and 2,000 were struck there. So all who fell that day of Benjamin were 25,000 men who drew the sword, all men of valor. But 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon and remained there 4 months. And the people of Israel turned back against Benjamin and struck them with the edge of the sword, the city, the men, beasts, and all that they found, and all the towns that they had found, they set on fire.
Jeez. This is like a good story.
It's pretty brutal, but yeah, I mean, it's a good war story. It's it's a good plan of attack, and the thing that started it all was their wickedness in Gibeah, murdering the concubine, and
Cecil B. DeMille could have made a great movie out of it.
yeah, it'd be a pretty extravagant movie there, yeah, for sure. So they kill about 26,000 men of Benjamin, and they set all their towns on fire and things. I mean, they're really, and it didn't have to be that way. They said, just give us the men who had perpetrated this, but they wanted to come up and defend them. So now that they've defeated them in battle, now the Israelites get back together, and they say, none of us shall give his daughter in marriage to Benjamin. So now there's not even going to be intermarriage with them. They're really cutting them off from the Israelites and saying, it's like, we've killed most of their men, and we're not going to give them any daughters in marriage to Benjamin. We're not going to marry any of them, and so.
Well, something's going to change.
The people came to Bethel and sat there until evening before God, and they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly. And they said, O Lord, the God of Israel, why has this happened in Israel, that today there should be one tribe lacking in Israel? So they're actually lamenting this idea that one of their tribes has been wiped out because of their evil. And the next day the people rose early and built there an altar and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And the people of Israel said, which of all the tribes of Israel did not come up in the assembly of the Lord? For they had taken a great oath concerning him who did not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, he shall surely be put to death. And the people of Israel had compassion for Benjamin, their brother, and said, one tribe is cut off from Israel this day. What shall we do for wives for those who are left, since we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them any of our daughters for wives? So it's like they're lamenting the idea that one of the tribes can't come up to the assembly because they're dying. We're wiping them out. We're not going to give them any daughters for wives. So what should we do for their widows, basically? What should we do for their war widows? And they said, what one is there of the tribes of Israel that did not come up to the Lord to Mizpah? And behold, no one had come up from the camp of Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were mustered, behold, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So for whatever reason, one clan from one of the tribes was a holdout. So the congregation sent 12,000 of their bravest men and commanded them, go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, also the women and the little ones. This is what you shall do. Every male and every woman that has lain with a male you shall devote to destruction. So basically by them not coming up, they were betraying their alliance with the Israelites. They were betraying worship of God. And so just like with the Benjaminites, it's like they need to be cut off as well. So they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man, brought them to Shiloh in Canaan. And the whole congregation sent word to the people of Benjamin who were at the rock of Ramon and proclaimed peace to them. They said, all right, we're done with the battle. To the ones that were hiding out there. And they gave them the women whom they had saved alive of Jabesh Gilead. But there were not enough of them. And the people had compassion on Benjamin because the Lord had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. So it's like there's sort of post-war negotiations and treaty and this kind of stuff going on. So they found wives for the men who had fled into the hill country. And then the elders said, what do we do for the wives who are left, since the women are destroyed out of Benjamin? There must be inheritance for the survivors, that a tribe not be blotted out. Yet we can't give them wives. So, verse 19, behold, there is a yearly feast of the Lord at Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, on the east of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem. And they commanded the people of Benjamin and said, go and lie in ambush in the vineyards and watch. If the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then come out of the vineyards and snatch each man his wife from the daughters of Shiloh and go to the land of Benjamin. So some sort of like a pagan spring ritual, sort of thing. And they're sort of saying, tell you what, I know we didn't have enough wives to give everybody, but they're going to come out in the middle of the night. And if they come out in the middle of the night, then just take one. It's weird. Strange stuff. But it's like you see the influences, it seems, of their pagan culture around them, too. Like, this is how you take wives, and this is how you do things, and this isn't how you do things. This isn't. Notice God is not saying this is a good thing. You're all sitting there saying, I never read this. Never remember any of this, do you? This doesn't show up in Sunday school lessons, does it? In VBS today, we're going to do the battle of Israel and Benjamin. All right, you kids, you're going to dress up as the Benjaminites, and you kids, you're going to dress up as the...
So then they didn't get wiped out. Benjamin come back.
Correct, yeah. So the fathers, they came, So we gave them wives, and so we're not guilty of wiping them out. Verse 23, and the people of Benjamin did so and took their wives according to their number from the dancers whom they carried off. And again, the problem there is that it seems to be like a pagan thing happening, and in Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle is and stuff, so that there's this, it's kind of a judgment against the pagans the embracing of the pagan dancing and stuff like that.
Gathering more than one at a time?
Possibly, yeah.
Or surplus women?
Yeah, they did so. They took their wives according to their number. Yeah.
Shortage of men.
I know, still today.
Yeah. So they went and returned to their inheritance and rebuilt the towns and lived in them. And the people of Israel departed from there at that time, every man to his tribe and family. They went out from there, every man to his inheritance. So basically they said, all right, you can rebuild your Benjaminite territory. We're going home. You got some wives now and things, so deal with it. But in those days, there was no king in Israel. Back to the beginning of chapter 19. It's like there was no king in Israel. And here's the biggest problem. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. We've heard that refrain a few times too. And that's really the big issue, is that everything was being just what was right in their own eyes. Whether it was dancing in the middle of the night in Shiloh, or whether it was abusing and killing concubines, or whatever it is. There's this low point in the morality of Israel at this time, with glimmers of restoration, in that when they're attacking the Benjaminites, they are looking for direction from God. But at the same time, everybody's still doing what is right in their own eyes. When we're all together, it's easy to be, like, we're Israelites. We'll talk to the Lord and we'll do these things. And when they go back to their own place, it's like, I'm going to do whatever I want.
Go to church and go home, kind of.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, it's which it's like it's easier to be faithful in those things when you band together, and when we're off on our own and left to our own place, it's harder because Satan tempts us and our sinful nature and these things. So the solution to that is, I think, gather more regularly, gather faithfully, and stay.
That last line is perfect. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
Yeah.
That's what you think.
So there's Judges. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. It's like it's not an optimistic end. It's just it's kind of despairing. It's like it kind of ends with that, but it's like, all right, Benjamin's still got to hang on, but everyone was doing right in their own eyes. Something better has to come of this. And when we get to Samuel, we'll start seeing what God does to restore that. When you have Samuel come in, it's kind of the final judge in that transition into the monarchy, picking up Saul and then David and Solomon and things. But we'll see then that at this point, everyone is doing what's right in their own eyes. And when they get a king, they're going to get, the king does what's right in his own eyes. Whether it's Saul or David or even Solomon, and then they lead everybody along with that too. So, yeah.
This whole episode would have spread throughout the 12 tribes, because I looked in my Bible, it has the map where the 12 tribes are. This was almost like in the center of all that. So that had to go out, and some kind of news carriers would take that and say, you see what happened down there.
Oh, yeah.
And spread the entire church.
Well, they had the 400,000 warriors had come from all the tribes. So they were all gathered there. And when he had sent the parts of his concubine out, that was to sort of send that proclamation to the 12 corners of the Israelites, to gather and to say, something truly wicked has happened here that we need to deal with. And so so not only within Israel, but then I think also in the borderlands and things, you got the Philistines, you got everybody else who's still in the Jebusites and everybody else who's still kind of like, holy cow, these guys are crazy. Yeah. And so like Jerusalem is actually in Benjaminite territory. Judah is kind of right by there. So, and the southern kingdom, after the exile, when the Assyrians come in and they take away the northern kingdom first, what's really left is Judah and Benjamin. I mean, that becomes the southern kingdom. That's who, when they're carried off, that's who comes back and is restored there. So that you've got Judah and Benjamin. Benjamin becomes very, very small, and basically it just becomes Judah, which is why they're called Jews. Judah. Everybody just went, oh. Well, yeah. So I mean, it's through Latin translation, writing and stuff. Yeah, it's how we get from, who are the people of Judah or Judeans? The Judeans are the Jews. So the land of Judah, and so it becomes shorthand then for the Israelites. Basically, get reduced down to Judah and Benjamin, and because we even have a couple people still being able to trace their lineages in the New Testament. Saul says he's a Benjaminite, and we've got Simeon and Anna. She was a she's from one of the, she can trace her lineage and tribes, but it's getting harder and harder to maintain what tribe are you from, because they were losing track of that in the exile and intermarriage and things like that. So yeah. You can see because they didn't fully conquer the inhabitants of the land, and that idolatry hung on amongst the people of Israel in Canaan, then it influenced them, and they went after the false gods of Baal and Molech and Asherah and all these, and that caused the conquering armies to come through and God to redeem them, and just that cycle happening and things. But it's all because those people that were left became that thorn in their side. As he said, it's like, if you don't wipe them out, they're going to become this thorn in your side that's going to irritate you, that pebble in your shoe that is never going to go away. And it never, they were harassed again and again. The Philistines will come up during Saul's reign, and so we got David and Goliath and that kind of stuff happening. So, yeah. So up to this point, we've had a pretty chronological move from, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, to everyone did what was right in their own eyes. But when you think about Adam and Eve in the garden, tempted by Satan to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, what did she say? When she saw that it was a delight to the eyes, desirable for making one wise, and was good for food, she took and ate. Adam and Eve, just the two of them, did what was right in their own eyes. And that's the breaking of the first commandment that leads, that is our sinful nature, that we desire to do what is right in our own eyes. And so it's not because we're ignorant of what is right in God's eyes. It's because, and it then comes with it the justification, the self-justification of, well, this is right in my perspective. This is right in my context, or what I need, or what I want. And so I will justify it. I will create laws and loopholes and explanations, and it's like, oh, it's not, he said don't eat it, but he knows it'll make you wise, and so is it really all that bad to eat it? And did God really say? Is how we get to the doing what is right in our own eyes. Is you then have to come up with a structure that makes it right, to convince yourself and your own sinful wants and desires to say, well, even if that's what God wants, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. And to a certain extent, whenever we sin, we do come to that. It's not because we didn't know it was right or wrong. It's just we decided, I know it's wrong, and I'm going to do it anyway. That's our sinful nature. And that's why God is gracious enough to send the law to us, either through word, through the proclamation of his word, through trials that we experience in our lives here, he sends us the law, and the effects of our sin, to turn us back to him. To defeat us on the first 2 days, so that on the third day he can grant us that great victory. That he disciplines us as a father who loves us, and not because he enjoys or has any pleasure in the afflictions of sinners, but always in the hopes of that restoration. That's always the hope. So, yeah. So we see in this that sort of continual cycle of sin and redemption that's going to continue, and that is the story of humanity, whether it's within the Israelites or within the church or within our own lives. That's our cycle of sinner and saint, that dichotomy that we end up living and struggling with. And sometimes pretty harshly.
Punishment fits the crime.
Yeah. So I had a buddy post a little commentary moment. Do you ever get this feeling like within the theological, the moral discussions, the political conversations, just everything that we're trying to, just the conversations that are trying to take place about the issues facing the country, but I think from a Christian's perspective, most significantly, the issues of morality and what is right and wrong and things. Do you get this feeling sometimes that it's just like, it's like we're not even speaking the same language anymore? And I felt that frustration, the moving target of definitions and how, progressives want to just sort of take what is sort of established understanding and then they twist the words and the language and stuff like that. My buddy posted something like, do you ever get this feeling that the confusion of terms and communication that we're experiencing right now might be God's intention? It wouldn't be unprecedented. He's done it before.
I don't understand it.
The Tower of Babel.
Yeah, and they all spoke different languages.
Yeah, so we think of like the Tower of Babel as this time, let's build a monument to ourselves to reach heaven, and what can we do all of ourselves and things, and God looks down and says we'll confuse their languages, and then they're each sent to their own direction and things. Where we set up distinct sort of language ways that, that's where different languages come from and things. But I think it's his comment and my observation in this from that is that we may be speaking the same language, but the meaning and the understanding are diverging from each other. We're and as sort of God's discipline, and there's sort of a judgment of that says, in hopes of those who are of the same, who know the shepherd's voice and speak the same language of God's word and truth, will know one another. He's sort of throwing this into confusion to make more stark the difference between light and dark, between good and evil in these ways. That the confusion of the language in this day doesn't have to be the drastic confusion of one language and another, but just even with our own language, it seems like we can't even communicate with each other anymore about these particular issues. I just thought it was a very poignant observation. It's sort of like, yeah, I guess the confusion of languages doesn't have to be quite so drastic as English and Russian or something like that. It can be as much as ideological language that just no longer compatible. I just thought it was an interesting observation.
That story always bothered me because it's not possible to build the tower because you can only go up so high. You're going to get up in the atmosphere where there's no air.
So yeah, to reach into the heavens. So they're in the plains of Shinar. So they're in a flat area. And there was definitely a sense throughout the whole Old Testament and among just sort of the spirituality of the ancients that if you want to get closer to God, you go up. go up on a mountain. And they're there in the plains of Shinar, and they're like, there's no mountain here. Let's make our own mountain. And so what do you see in the ancient world? What do the places of worship in the ancient world look like? Mountains. They're pyramids. So, we're going to get this. There, we'll do
We
that.
lived in Pennsylvania.
Oh, look, I get to use my markers.
When we lived in Pennsylvania, I always felt closer to God.
Well, don't tell the Coloradoans that. Although most people from Colorado are certainly higher.
Yeah.
So, I think when we think of the Tower of Babel, be cautious. Don't think of, don't think of tower. That's structurally not capable with the bricks and the technology that they had at that point. That's not what we see in the ancient world. We don't see towers like that in the ancient world.
Does the Bible say how tall it was?
Pyramids?
No, I don't think so. It's just that it was unfinished, and which, by the way, is Tower of Babel became Babylon, which is now Baghdad. But what we do have in the ancient world is not, vertical skyscrapers, but we have
So somebody was drunk when they made that.
so they walk on it a lot. So, yeah, we'll put people on it too. This is what we see around the world, and in distinct places too. You got South America. You've got these. You've got in Egypt. In Egypt, they pyramids, which if you look at them more closely, it's this, but they're really, really tiny. Right. They're big stones, though. I mean, they're these are just so much bigger than like the places in South America that I think they're comparative. Mexico, the Yucatan, those different areas and things. This is what you see there, and it's very uniform around the world. That this is a structural. There are a couple reasons for that, possibly. Just from an engineering standpoint, this is possible, and so they come up with the same solution. Or two, there's similar origins. I mean, it all comes back to the Tower of Babel ultimately, because the Tower of Babel was when Shem, Ham, and Japheth and Noah, I forget who all was on the boat there for a second. How many of each animal did Moses put on the ark? None. It was Noah, not Moses. But so they get off, and God tells them, fill the earth and subdue it, and they don't, and they try to build this tower instead. So the reason maybe all these things look the same is because they all have the same family origin. I mean, they all had a cultural origin at one point. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Or aliens. Yeah. So it is pretty
Well, it's
interesting.
hard to believe.
So they make their own mountain. That's the idea behind the Tower of Babel. Is this?
It's impossible to believe to what they could produce if
If you let them do this, nothing will be impossible for them. And look at where we're at now. I mean, if he was worried about building a pyramid, and so he confused their languages, it just shows that there's a different. It wasn't what they were. He wasn't concerned about what they were technologically capable of. Because our technological capabilities now are, far surpassed being able to build a pyramid. Well, I say that, but at the same time, the engineers who really, if the engineers ever look really closely at the pyramids in Egypt and stuff, and like the stonework and things like that, they don't know how they did it. The precision with which the stones are cut, the size of the stones, the locations where the stones had to come from and things. And you're talking about in granite, which is still, even with carbide tooling and the things, the scientifically advanced tooling that we have today with machines and hydraulics and everything, it's still really hard to do. how they got them on top of each other, how they were, and they build their sarcophaguses. The sarcophagus are really, really amazing because they're these huge stone basins, basically. So you got one big block of stone, and I never realized this until I did more woodworking and started looking more at like how engineers look at things. If you've got a block and you try to carve into it, the hardest thing is making this parallel with this. It's very easy that while you're doing it, you're going to end up with, something like this, to make them totally parallel. And then from above, to make this 90, make all these 90 degrees, to make this 90 degrees. And then, if you're carving in there, to make this corner, if you're carving with things, making a straight edge like that is really, 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 really hard. There's always a little bit of a radius inside there. But inside the sarcophaguses in the pyramids, they're almost perfectly, they're really, really small, and they're parallel to within, I think, thousandths of an inch across very large things coming out of one piece of stone with a lid in a hallway that you can't move the thing in. So you've got a thing this big, and the hallway is this big, which means you can't turn it. Which means either you built the hallway around it, or something else happened. It's really pretty amazing. Plus the different chambers and the stairs, and just there are all these different places where these things were, and and the stones were from hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
They didn't have no pneumatic chisels either.
No. They didn't even have steel.
How did it all stay up? Do they have, like in the pyramids, the chambers, are they in this whole thing, or is it just all underground?
So this is the ground level here. I think the chambers are connected inside in different places, and there's halls and things like that connect to different ones. Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is pretty amazing. They don't know how to do it. It's like they did all this in granite, which they don't know how to do it.
Reminds you of the reference in Scripture where Christ is described as the cornerstone. Once you set the cornerstone, it gives you the direction for the entire building.
That squares up everything.
Christ is the cornerstone giving us direction.
Yeah. Or the big obelisks that they have in Egypt and stuff like that. I mean, they've got these in the quarries hundreds of miles away, laying down inside, like if you're looking down from above, they got these huge trenches where inside there is this monolith, ready, being carved in place there, that eventually they got to stand the thing up without snapping it in half. It's incredible.
It really is.
It just sort of shows that there was a technology that they had, lost, and then we've recovered maybe a different track of things. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, I don't know how we got on this, but just talking about just Israelite history. Oh, the languages and stuff. Yeah.
Should leave that up there. People will wonder what you're teaching us.
Always got to be careful when you're drawing an obelisk. or if you're really rich and you're building a rocket. I have to get Jim's opinion on the stylistic design of Jeff Bezos' rocket. Like they said in Shrek, maybe he's compensating for something. So.
Yep.
Um.
You can't put it out of your mind.
Right. Yeah. So let's see if we can. Any questions about sort of Israelite history up to this point? We've got that chronological thing, and then we're gonna next is Ruth, which is sort of this in-between story, if you will, that happens during the judges' time, near the end, because Ruth and Boaz are the maybe just the great-grandparents to David. Really close, like surprisingly close. So definitely near the end of that. So, speaking of genealogies, I found out I'm sort of related to C.F.W. Walther, the founder of the Missouri Synod. I'm his, let's see, no, not me, but how to figure it out.
You have the same father.
Well, yeah, Father Abraham. Oh, yeah. It's like third cousins 3 times removed. Is the... Oh, yeah, you know, that is my relation to him is third cousin 3 times removed. So there's 3 generations back to a parallel to his third cousin, and then 3 generations to me, and then their cousinness is related to 3 generations back from them. They have the same father. So 3 generations and then 3 generations to me. So third cousins, thrice removed. So
My
it's
family-
like, I mean, we're like this.
My family's listed in Zion on the Mississippi.
Yeah, all right. Cool. What last name? Oh, yeah. I know the Mark Worth name. Absolutely. My grandmother did a very extensive genealogy, and every year one of the girls has to do a social studies report, or English report, doing a genealogical study, and so that book has just been like a gold mine for them because, you know, with the photographs and all this different kind of stuff. And I decided, because one of my great grandparents was, they owned a sock factory in Chemnitz, Germany, in Saxony, and I just did a quick Google search to sort of say, you know, is there any sort of secular information about that stuff? And it brought up a blog connected to, well, the guy who owned the stocking factory wrote a letter that listed like all of these people related to C.F.W. Walther and how that all connected, and somebody had done up the family tree for that, and I'm like, oh, well, I know who that is, and there he is, and oh, look at that. So,
I had a relative on Titanic.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
If you go to the Titanic
The
exhibit,
steward.
he was a steward. There's a great big picture of Nesca on the Titanic.
Wow.
Did you make
Did
it?
you? Pardon?
I
Did
had
you
a
make
sinking
it?
feeling when I met Dave.
Make sure you make enough room on the door, because you could, look into your family histories. There's probably no better time to do it than now with genealogy, Ancestry.com and stuff like that. Look into it. You just never know what you're going to find.
Our daughter checked the ancestry that one of our great grandfathers, his name is on the wall of the church in Jamestown.
Oh, really?
So we go way back.
That's really cool.
And Rich is one of his great grandfathers founded Salem, Massachusetts.
Wow.
Conant.
So look into your family histories. They're pretty cool. So, all right, we'll call it a day. Let's call it a day. And I'll tell you what. As far as our plans for when we get together next week, you know, do we want to keep going through the summer? Do we want to take a break? Let's get some input on that next week when we get back together. We could do we could do a study on Ruth, and then maybe we save the Samuels and the Kings stuff for later or something like that. We'll figure it out. But just something to think about. So. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll go through.